I would have to say that my most memorable moment at Blandford was probably sitting in the dunes at spring camp.
Definitely spring camp.
Things that jump to mind when people ask me that are spring camp.
Definitely spring camp. I had a blast there.
Spring camp, which I'm sure a lot of people say, but it was just great being able to hike along the dunes and get sand all in our shoes.
Kind of the big year-end event where you kind of have created all your friendships and you're kind of taking them to the next level because you're sharing all these crazy experiences, backpacking and doing all these natural activities.
Backpacking was really the first advanced hiking I'd ever done beyond walking to like the convenience store, and it was a great experience just walking all day and then setting up camp, making dinner over an open fire, going to bed, waking up and walking again. It was definitely roughing it and it was fun.
Just getting 60 friends that you really know you can count on and having such a great experience with such great teachers and people just to be around. It was quite the experience.
I remember especially my friends, many friendships that I still have today. I remember magic spots in Miss Beckman's class, and I always remember getting big bear hugs from Mr. G.
I think that my most memorable moment was probably working in the magic spots, sitting out in kind of a secluded place in the woods and just kind of writing about what you saw and what you felt and what was all around you.
Well, at fall camp, I got to be the MC in the talent show, and my talent was singing, but I sang as an Elvis Presley impersonator. And so I had this awesome white suit that my grandma and mom helped crochet a bunch of beads on, and it looked awesome, and we dyed my hair, and I had a little longer hair, so we styled it like that.
Shoot, that's gotta be, Christmas Carol auditions. Everybody's kind of wondering who's gonna be the main character, and then I make it to the last round, and then I'm Scrooge, and I'm just kind of, is this real? Am I dreaming? And then it hits me, and it's real, and I don't know. Nothing really seemed to be better than that.
It was a great time, and Mr. Lundy asked me to be MC, and he's crazy, but awesome.
So I'm Anushka Steinman, Director of the Nature Center. Of the last 4 years, I will never be able to walk in Mary Jane's shoes. As you all know, she's the founding director of Blandford Nature Center, and I'm just thrilled that there is still, 45 years later, a nature center that I get to try to pretend to run the way that she did. And many of you may know the story. Those of you who are younger, those of you who are older reads, you may not know. We've been a nonprofit organization for the last 7 years, so we no longer are managed by the city staff or city funding. So one of the things when I'm talking with donors and we talk about the shared space between the Nature Center and the school, one of the things I encourage them to do is, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same thing, the 3 acres that this current school sits on, and I know some of you were over at CA Frost, but imagine the 3 acres kind of from the back of this building out to the parking lot with a fence around it. And that would be your environmental classroom. It would not be very fun, would it? Because where does all the fun happen? Way out past that, right? In the ravines and in the woods. And that's where we hope that the community, your families, your friends, embrace the fact that as a nonprofit nature center, we're working really hard to keep that 143-acre classroom open and available to all of you as students and all the students we hope to have here in the next 45 years. So I am not going to take up any more of your time. I really just wanted to welcome you. I'm thrilled that they put together this 40-year reunion and that the stars of the program over the last 40-plus years are here to talk to each of you. If you have any questions or concerns over the next couple of days, please feel free to contact me. I have my cell phone. Jeff's got my number. Please feel free to contact me. We encourage you to explore the grounds over the next couple of days. As long as you are wearing your beep buttons, then you are golden. Otherwise, my staff will probably ask you, where have you paid? Because we now charge admission to the site. So just keep your buttons on, and if not, please just tell my staff I'm a beep alum. They're going to give you an orange sticker to wear, and you're golden as well. But again, thank you so much for coming. Please spread the word that we are a nonprofit and we need your support, we need the community support. We did leave some membership materials at the registration table, encouraging you to connect to us through Facebook, LinkedIn, all those social media so that you know what's going on. And so that you could be the person who travels the farthest next time because you read about an activity and you come back to Blandford for that. So welcome and have a great time while you're here.
Hold on, Larry. Hold on. Anushka, thank you so much. I love the point about this being our classroom, and it wouldn't be much if we just had this 3 acres. So.
And that's what all the other core schools have. That's why this is an amazing school. You have a great classroom.
And Anushka is faced with a situation that other directors weren't faced with, and that is being a nonprofit. So you have to raise all the money. And thanks so much for finding a way to do that, so that this whole thing can keep on.
We're glad you're doing cool projects like this that we can use when you're not there.
Absolutely. Right. Can I introduce you a little bit?
Go right ahead.
I first met Larry when I was recertifying in the mid-'80s to go into teaching, not being certified. And Larry was conducting a lot of workshops, and I thought, well, science workshops, great. And they were science hands-on workshops, so my love for teaching and Larry's love for teaching and for teaching how to teach science found a quick mesh. We had fun. Larry loves to have fun. Larry has been having fun teaching science and teaching teachers how to teach science all your career.
Mm-hmm.
So Larry has influenced a lot of teachers to teach hands-on. And you go way back. You go way back to the beginning of Blandford. The first farmer. He's the first farmer. So Larry has stories, lots of stories. And Larry's going to share some fun things. So thanks so much, Larry.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see all of you. I was here kind of early on. Started with Blandford in 1969 in March. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time several times. Helped me start this program in 1973 and then moving on to City High in 1976 and getting that school going as well. Then I got into some of the staff development and so forth when I met Jeff. And somewhere in the mid-'80s, I had a call at that time I was a science supervisor for Grand Rapids. I got a call from a principal and said, Larry, you might want to come to the school. Mr. Wizard is going to be here. He's going to do an assembly. I thought, wow, fantastic. I grew up watching Mr. Wizard. Well, I went, it was a Mr. Wizard organization, but it wasn't really Mr. Wizard. And it was a nice program, and afterwards I asked the principal, I said, well, how much did this cost you to bring this in? And she told me, I thought, I could do that for our schools and save them some money. So for about 18 years, I did a program called The Magic of Science. I did it around Michigan at science conferences and different schools and so forth. And I always tried to bring in some of the wonder of science, and also kind of take a look at some of the content of science and take a look at some of the perspectives as well. And I was fortunate in the last 11 years of my career, I was able to teach geology at Grand Valley State University. So this is actually, I guess, close to my 44th year that I've been involved in education in one way or another. And I have some things I'd like to share with you this evening. I'm going to need some volunteers at various times to help me out. Is it Kathleen? Kathleen, yeah. Want to come up here, please? How do you do? And you are 2012, 2013. Stayed recent participant. Would you come right on over here, please? One of the things I would try to work on in teaching science is to take a look at perspectives of things. So would you compare these two objects, please?
Okay.
What do you notice about them?
Well, this one is bigger than this one.
Okay.
This one is heavier than this one.
Okay, so even though this one is larger, that one is heavier. Mm-hmm. You're quite confident. Okay, good. Would you like to confirm that, please? Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm going to need your help, too. Would you come up here and help me, please? What I want you to do is to hold on to these, turn around so everyone can see you, please. Okay. What I'm going to do is we're going to put one object in here, okay? And then we're going to put a rubber band around this one, okay? And would you hold that in your, just like that, please, okay? And we're going to put other object in here, just like that, okay? And we're going to put a rubber band around this one, okay. And would you agree that the smaller one is heavier?
Yes.
Okay, great. Now, Kathleen, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to hold your fingers out and extend your index fingers, please, just like that, and close your eyes. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to suspend these on your fingers, and I want you to identify the one that is so much heavier than the other one. Whoop. Don't point it down. Keep it up. Okay? All right. Fingers up. All right. Fingers up. There we go. Eyes closed. Now identify that one that is so much heavier than the other one. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, open your eyes. Seemed a little hesitant. You were quite confident too. Come on, step up for a replay, sir. Same routine. Turn around. Close your eyes. Extend your index fingers. Okay? And I'm going to, eyes closed. Okay? That one on. Okay. Eyes closed. Okay, which one's heavier?
This one?
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Doing quite well. Okay. We need you to close your eyes, extend your fingers. All right. Eyes closed. Okay. Still confident? Which one's heavier? Which one is it?
This one? They both kind of feel the same.
They feel the same. Yeah. Well, before you said they felt this one was definitely heavier.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, let's check this out. Don't go away. Would you please open that up? So you're all three of you confident that the smaller one was heavier. You said it was a little bit harder to tell with the rubber band. Now, if the small one is indeed heavier, that pan should stay down when I put this one on, right? So let's put this on. And it seems that the large one is actually heavier. Not by much, but it is. What's going on? All three of you were quite confident in holding it like this, that this one was definitely heavier, right? Suspending it with a rubber band, maybe not quite as confident, but still reasonably so. In reality, it's not true. So the things that we perceive are not always quite as we perceive them. Why? What's going on with this? Do you have an idea? You can sit down again. Thank you very much. Let's give them a nice appreciation here. What do you think, Zane? Gravity is making the denser metal feel heavier. You're right, this has a greater density because it's a much smaller volume and the mass is pretty similar. So you're right, the density is heavier, is greater for this. But there's something about the way we perceive things. Come on over here for just a moment. If you extend your hands, please. Would you have agreed that the small one is heavier? Yes. Why is that, when this one really is? What's going on in our perception of this? What's the difference in the area of my hands being stimulated by these metal objects? There's less area being triggered with this, isn't there? So the nerves in a couple of my fingers are saying, hey, there's an object here and it feels very heavy. This is stimulating my entire palm, my thumb, my fingers saying, there's an object here, but it's not really that heavy. So sometimes the way we perceive things can be a little bit misleading. Let's try another one. Mary Kay, would you? This is my wife, Mary Kay. She's going to serve as kind of a lab assistant. Mary Kay taught in this program 1974, 1975. So. She was 12 when she taught here. Okay, I'm going to need a couple of the other right here. I need to have another volunteer. Is there a volunteer from perhaps a little bit longer ago than 2012, 2013? Okay, come on up. This is Mike Postumus. Mike was a student here at Blandford and again at City, a little bit after the time that I was there. Okay. Mike, what I would like you to do is to compare these two blocks, please.
Am I weighing them in my hands?
Just any comparison. Yeah, right, whatever you see, whatever you think.
Appears, or I'm perceiving that this is lighter, possibly made out of some type of wood or maybe a plastic. This one feels more like a rock, like a heavy tile. This one's maybe a little slipperier. They're about the same size.
How about their temperatures?
Well, the one that is heavier I'm perceiving to be cooler than the one that is lighter.
Okay, so this one is warmer than this one, you're saying, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. So now the question is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an ice cube on those two blocks. Which one will melt the ice faster? The block that is warmer or the block that is cooler? What do you think? The block that is warmer should melt the ice faster, you think? That seems like a reasonable conclusion, don't you think? What do you think, Mike? Would you agree with that?
That is a reasonable conclusion.
Yes, it is a reasonable conclusion. But we're going to put these blocks on here. Now this is the warm block on the left. This is the cold block on the right. What's happening, Mike?
It seems that our reasonable conclusion wasn't quite as reasonable as we thought. The block on the right is melting at an extremely fast rate, actually much faster than I've ever seen an ice cube melt.
Why is that? Why is it that the object that felt colder is melting the ice faster than the object that felt warmer? Yes, Ryan.
Well, I'm going to guess wood won't dissipate the heat as much, whereas metal does. Metal conducts.
Okay, great idea. So you're assuming that this is made out of wood and this is made out of metal.
According to what you said.
Okay.
I said maybe.
You're right, this is made out of metal. It's solid aluminum. This is not made out of wood, it's made out of very dense styrofoam. Barb? It is amazing, isn't it? Okay, could I have a paper towel, please? So what do we know about the difference in which these materials conduct heat? Which one conducts heat faster?
Well, the metal conducts heat faster than the styrofoam because the styrofoam usually keeps things cooler longer. Because I'm not quite sure why, but I know that it's the styrofoam keeps it cooler longer just because it has a smaller density than the metal.
It isn't so much the density on this as what's called thermal conductivity. It's the way an object will conduct heat. Heat is the transfer of energy from one object to another. Mike, I'd like you to make one other comparison before you leave. I'd like you now to compare the temperatures of these two blocks and see how different they are from when you started.
Extremely cold, much like ice, and this is about the same as I remember it.
So the heat that was in the solid aluminum plate was transferred to the ice cube very, very quickly because of the thermal conductivity of aluminum, whereas the styrofoam is an insulator, and it would take a very long time for ice to melt in styrofoam. And so you were absolutely right when you said that the styrofoam will keep something cooler for a longer period of time. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to pass some things out. This is kind of an everybody participate activity. So I want you to take a look at these items and then pass them along. Here we go. Have one for every row and take a look at it, pass it along. what we're going to do with these, it's kind of a detective game. You've probably played a game similar to this before. Something in the neighborhood of 20 questions where you get to ask any question that you wish that I can answer yes or no. What you're trying to figure out is what are these things? And secondly, how did they form? Okay, I think we're all circulating around now. Okay. Okay, who has a question for me? Let's kind of focus up here now, please. Does someone have a question for me? Trying to figure out what these things are and how they were formed. Yes, sir?
Is it a mineral?
Is this a mineral? I would have to say no. Yes? No. Did you hear the question? The first question is it a mineral? I would have to say no to that. And secondly, was it ever living? And I'd have to say no. The one about is it a mineral, that's kind of a tough one to answer just yes or no, but there is a reason for my no answer on that. Yes?
Is it natural or man-made?
I cannot answer that yes or no. Pick one.
Is it man-made?
No. Yes?
Does it have carbon in it? Carbon? Does it have carbon in it?
There is some carbon in there, yes. Yes?
Could you find it in a household?
Could you find this in a household? Yes, although not as much as we used to. Did I find it in a kitty litter box? No, I did not find it in a kitty litter box. Yes?
Is it a building material, or was it a building material?
Was this a building material? No. Yes?
Does it contain plant matter?
Does it contain plant matter? No.
Is it at all similar to insulation?
Is it similar to insulation? I don't know of any insulation that would be like this. Yes, sir? Does it have calcium in it? Yes. It does. And I'm holding a small bottle of hydrochloric acid. And if I put this on this material, you could see that it fizzes very readily. So you have helped to identify, chemically at least, what it is. It is a calcium carbonate. Okay? Next part of the question is, how is it formed? Because we know that it's natural. Other ideas? Yes?
Did it grow?
Did it grow? It depends on how you identify growing. Was it internal growth by cellular division, such as your body? No. Did it grow externally by having more calcium carbonate added to the outside? Yes.
Was it deposited by a sea creature?
Was it deposited by a sea creature? Define sea.
Saltwater.
No. Over here, yes.
Is it coral?
Is it coral? Wonderful. Guess? No. Yes?
Is this a trick question?
Is this a trick question? No. Other questions that might guide us? Yes, ma'am.
Is it a product of water deposits?
Oh, did you hear that question? Question is it a product of water deposit? I would have to say yes. I'm going to switch that around a little bit. It was deposited in water. Other ideas? Yes, sir.
Not salt, though. Not salt water.
That's correct. It's fresh water. Fish Lake in Berry County. Other ideas? I like to use this material. Actually, it's called marl. Marl, M-A-R-L. And I like to use this material to show students how Earth systems are interact with each other and how they're integrated. Because this, when someone said, is it a mineral? The reason I said no to that is it doesn't really have internal crystallinity. It is perhaps the precursor to limestone. It might be a limestone wannabe that maybe over time, perhaps it could develop into a limestone. But this is found in Michigan in a lot of our hard water lakes where there's a phosphorus deficiency in the water chemistry. We don't find it in many of our lakes because the phosphorus is too high. The phosphate level is too high. But in Fish Lake in Berry County, Lime Lake in Kent County, you would be inclined to find these things in very hard water lakes. It's actually formed as a byproduct of photosynthesis. Because as algae are carrying out photosynthesis, they take carbon dioxide out of the water, creating a microenvironment of deposition. The groundwater carries that calcium from our limestone into the water. The photosynthesis of the algae help to produce a deposition. The air provides the acid rain to begin with. Normal rainfall is about a 5.5 pH. That helps to dissolve some of the limestone and carrying it on in through to our system. Okay? So that's marl. It does, most people when they first see it do make the assumption that it's coral. So that was a great guess over there. Okay, moving on now, I'm going to take a look at I need another volunteer. Someone who's not had a chance to, Nick, you want to help me out? I just love it when people volunteer like that. Okay. Nick, what I need you to do is I need you to work in kind of helping me confirm some things here, okay? And we have over here, okay, if you want to bring, okay. Yeah, put it on the table over here. All right. Whoop. Watch that cord. Okay. You know what this is, Nick?
A cup or a measuring cup?
Measuring cup, yes. But in science, we like to give it another name. I don't know. Do you remember the Muppets? No. Oh. Does anyone here remember the Muppets and the guy that ran around with Dr. Bunsen Honeydew? What was his name? Beaker, yes, and his head looked like this. So this is a beaker. This is a graduated cylinder. Graduated means that it has marks on it, not that it's graduated from anything. And if we look at this cylinder, what number do we have here? 200 milliliters of water. And if I pour that into this beaker, how much water should we have in this beaker? 200 milliliters, right. Beakers are notoriously inaccurate. That's why it usually says plus or minus about 5%. The other nice thing about beakers is all you have to do is tilt them a little bit one way or the other and get whatever reading you want. So if I just tilt that a little bit, we get to 200. Okay, but when I poured that from the cylinder into the beaker, what changed about that water?
It formed in a different way?
Yes, it took a different form, a different shape, didn't it? Well, we're going to try something else here. Nick, what I want you to do, if you would please, don't go away. I want you to take a look at this right here by putting your hands up on your head just like that. Okay, now we're going to take a look at another property of water because we have 200 milliliters of water. I'm going to pour this into this cup right on top of your head like that. Okay? Now, I'm not a magician, I'm a scientist. A magician usually uses a black cloth. I just happen to have a cheap paper towel. Okay, we'll put that on like that. Is that right? Is that right? Okay. A magician usually has some kind of a stopwatch or something to make things go to sleep or hypnotize. That's close enough on that one. And now, what I have done, would you believe I have hypnotized that water and I have put it under my command? Do you believe that? Maybe. Maybe, okay. And I command that water to stay in the cup. It works. Even if I take this cup and put a nail through, like that. Any water coming out on you?
No.
Okay, can you feel that there's water in there yet? Feel the weight of the cup on your head?
Yes.
Okay, no water coming out. I wonder why. What do you think? Why isn't there water coming out? Oh, the nail is in a space where there's no water? Oh, the nail's too high? Oh, let's put one through down lower. Watch your fingers coming out this way right here. Watch your finger right there. There we go. Okay. That nail's lower. Still no water coming out. What do you think? Oh, the hole is being filled by the nail. That's a really good idea. We'll have to test your thought on that for a moment. Let me have this just a moment. Sometimes people have accused me of putting a false bottom in these cups, so I'll put one right through the bottom. You can put your hands down now if you wish. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to test that theory about the nail being filling up the hole. Ah, you thought maybe that nail was too high, right? And you said that maybe the nail was filling the hole, so we'll take that one out. Then the idea of the bottom, secret bottom, still no water coming out. Even when I turn it on its side like this, there's still no water coming out. And yet the cup is still filled. You feel that mass on there, Nick?
Yes.
What's going on? What happened? Yes. Did the styrofoam absorb the water? What a great idea. Have you ever had to drink out of a styrofoam cup? Did it absorb the drink as you were drinking it? Okay, so probably not. But that was a wonderful idea. Yes? I put a sponge or something in the bottom. No to the sponge, yes to the something. Yes? Other ideas, yes? Liquid nitrogen. If I had put liquid nitrogen in there, it would have frozen the water, but you would have seen a lot of bubbles and so forth coming out of there probably. So probably not on that. So let's turn your hand over like this, because I did put something in the cup. How's that feel? Squishy. Squishy, yes, it feels very squishy. And there it is. We turn that material into a gel by using a chemical called sodium polyacrylate. Now, here it is in the common form. Now, Nick, would you please hold this diaper like this, kind of spread it out? Because there have been claims that the diaper can hold over 28 times its volume in whatever is put in there, right? So I went out and did a little chemical collecting around the farm, and I picked up a chemical. It's called K9P. It's right here. And so with a little bit of K9P, we're going to see if this diaper can hold 400 milliliters of K9P. Okay? What I want you to do is kind of rock the baby a little bit. Okay, keep rocking. Okay. Get it up to this area a little more. He's a boy. Okay. Okay. Good job, Nick. Keep going. Oh, you're doing a wonderful job. Okay, look at that. Tilt it down a little bit more so it doesn't come out the side. Down. Tilt it up like that, and we'll put the rest. Okay, here's an entire beaker of K9P in the diaper, leaking a little bit out the edge there. That happens sometimes. Okay? So in reality, if you use distilled water, which is what this really was, distilled water with a little yellow food color, these will hold up to over 28 times their weight. But what the baby puts in there isn't distilled water. So it cuts it down quite a bit. Okay? So, but thanks so much for helping out on that. Great job. Okay, can we darken the room now, please? Let's see if we can get the room as dark as possible, if we can pull the shades. I'll try to stand in the dark up here. I guess there are windows there. That won't do a whole lot. Okay. Quite often when I do demonstrations, I try to have some kind of a common theme that's working through. So far, we've been taking a look at things associated with density and kind of the way that we perceive objects. This room is a little bit light, so we'll see how well these projectors work in the light. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the primary colors of light and I'm going to mix them, and we'll see what we can develop from that. So if I turn on the first primary color of light, what do you see? Red. And if I block out the light, we see a black shadow. Then I'm going to turn down that first primary color of light and bring up the second primary color of light, which is blue. And if I block it out, I cast a black shadow. Then I bring up the third primary color of light, which is green. Because we are mixing light, we are not mixing pigments. So this is mixing light by addition rather than subtraction, and we can see that this will cast a black shadow. But if I go back and turn on the red along with the green, what color will I get when I mix them? Yellow. When we mix red light and green light, we get yellow, and if I block out, I can make a black shadow if I block out both. I can make a red shadow if I'm blocking out the green, and a green shadow if I'm blocking out the red. If I turn down the green and I bring up the blue, mix the blue and the red, we get a magenta, and I can make multiple colored shadows in here as well, depending on which one I'm blocking out. If I turn down the red and bring up the green with the blue, we get a color called cyan. And if I block out the light, I can get a blue shadow if I'm blocking out the green, and a green shadow if I'm blocking out the blue, and black if I'm blocking out both. If I mix all three, what will I have? If the room were a little darker, we would see that there's actually white. Because when you adjust colors on a television, what three colors do you have to adjust? Red, green, and blue, right? And if I cast shadow here, I can make multiple colors of shadows depending on which light is being blocked out. We can see magenta shadows, yellow, cyan, green, red, blue, and black. And depending just on how we mix the colors. So the three primary colors of light are the red, blue, and green. The next one along with that, this one's going to take, hold this one still for a moment. I'm going to step over here to my right. And what color do you see when I hold this still? A little bit of a pinkish color, not a real distinct color. Let's take a look what happens when I twist it. Okay, when I twirl this, what colors do you see now? Red, green, and blue, the primary pigments of light. And if I slow it down, do you start to pick up the yellow? Picking up any cyan? How about magenta? And if I bring it back to a stop and hold it still, you should be close to white. The lights aren't all just perfect on that. There are actually 3 little blinking LEDs in here, and it depends on how our brain is putting those colors together, what we'll actually perceive. But when we see all being triggered at the same time, it's fairly white, and then it goes into individual colors as soon as I start to move it. That. Okay? So that's mixing light. Let's see what we have next. How are we doing on time, Jeff? Okay. What we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at another object over here. We can have lights back on, please. And going to need to have another volunteer, because now we're going to take a look at some things associated with air pressure. You want to come up and help? Okay, great. And your name is? Taya. Taya, good. Come right on over here, please, Taya. Would you please grab that rubber mat at the corner and just pick it up? Oh, a real big thing, right? Now what I want you to do is pick it up by the hook. Don't slide it, just pick it straight up. Yeah, okay, let's put it back down there again. All right, don't slide it, just... Okay, hold on, all right, that's good, that's good. Why was it so much harder?
Because like the hook, kind of the metal bottom part of the hook could be stuck to the table a little bit.
Oh, the metal part of the hook is stuck to the table, but when I picked it up by the corner, pick it up by the corner again. Why isn't the metal hook stuck this time?
Because where I'm picking it up kind of affects it, because the leather sticks down on it, whereas if I just lift it by the corner.
I'm going to give you a hint. Our theme right now is air pressure. Something to do with air pressure. What do you think? Help us out.
Air trapped in the middle, like so it makes a suction.
We are creating what you call a suction. Well, Mother Nature and science, science never sucks. Yeah, science can push, it can pull, but in Mother Nature, we can say that we are creating a vacuum. Okay? So what we have here, when you're trying to lift this up, you are trying to create a vacuum, you're creating a partial vacuum underneath, and the air on top is pushing down the 14.7 pounds pressure for every square inch. Okay? Well, we're going to see if we can take a look at that with one other thing. We're going to need some more water, please. Okay. This is called a har bottle. Okay? Has a hole in the bottom, balloon inside. What do you think is going to happen? Can I blow this up? How about if I put that stopper in there? Can I blow it up now?
No.
Why not?
Because the air inside won't let more mass come in because it's already probably full.
Okay, you're right. Good job. So if I take this out, can I blow it up?
Yes.
Why didn't it collapse?
Because there's enough space because the hole was letting out some of the extra air that was in there, so you were allowed to add more mass into it.
Okay, what's between the balloon and the glass now, do you think?
Air.
But not much, right? Because if I take this stopper out and let the air back in, then the balloon will collapse again, right? So this again is working on air pressure, but what we're going to try is something a little different here. We're going to see what happens. Would you hold that for me, please? I'm glad you're wearing shorts and so forth today, because that way you won't get as wet. There we go. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this balloon. Okay. Between my moving the bottle around and you're giving me a moving target, we're going to get a little water on the outside, but that's all right. That's how we have this tub below us. Okay. I'm going to fill this with water and see what happens now when we pull that plug. What's going to happen?
I have a feeling the water's going to shoot out.
Think the water's going to shoot out?
Yes.
Why?
Because when we pulled it out last time, the air in the balloon just let go.
I don't have that balloon all the way filled. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
Yes.
So should we put more water in or just do it this way?
I want to see what this happens.
Okay. Well, so we're going to pull this stopper out very slowly. Should I tilt it this way?
Oh, please don't.
Oh, okay. How about straight up and down?
Sure.
Or you want to pick someone in the audience?
Yeah. How about
Okay. All right. No. We'll try to pull this out slowly and see what happens. And if there's, you had such a wonderful idea. But why didn't it work?
Because there's not a complete amount of water in the balloon.
So what if we just inch that balloon away from that hole just a little bit? Think we can get it to flow? That's what you're anticipating to begin with, right? Yeah. But at first, the balloon was working just as the stopper, and it wasn't allowing the air back in. So when we created the vacuum, that didn't work out very well. Okay? It worked out well as far as the vacuum is concerned, but not with your particular idea. But you had a great idea on that. Good thinking on that. Thanks a lot for your help. Let's give her a nice hand for helping out. Okay. I'm going to get a... Okay. Now, could I have a little more mature volunteer this time? Come on up. You know, and your name is? Christian. 2012, 2000. Oh, you're kind of new out here too, right? Yes. All right. Well, I really enjoy it when people volunteer when they know not for what they are volunteering. So we're going to try some things here because we were talking about air pressure over there, right? And we said that air is exerting a pressure of 14.7 pounds per square inch all around your body. Can you tell that?
What do you mean by that?
Can you feel it? You say, oh man,
No.
that air pressure is pushing me down. No. Because that's what you've been growing up in. It's what you're used to on planet Earth here, right? Okay, would you, we're going to change things here just a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have you step onto this table. You may use a chair to help you get up here if you wish. Okay. And what I want you to do is get in the bag, have a seat, work your way on down. Can you scoot forward just a little bit? You've got a lot of the bag towards your back there. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather this bag around you, and I'm going to always leave your head out of the bag. That's really important. Okay? So I'm going to keep your head out of the bag, and I want you to describe how it feels in there.
It's really high, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of air in there.
Doesn't feel like there's a lot of, but can you still move your arms?
Yeah.
Okay, can you move, kind of spread your knees apart a little bit too? That work all right? Okay. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to change things just a little bit.
Oh no.
I want you to put this right at your belly. Make sure it doesn't get blocked by anything.
Okay.
And I'm going to take this plastic and I'm going to gather it around like this. Kind of seal that off just a little bit. And we're going to see what happens when we turn on the vacuum cleaner. Okay, now I want you to try to move.
Oh man.
Now, I want you to describe how that felt.
There was no air and I could not move at all.
So, so could you feel those 14.7 pounds pressure on you that way?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've seen these storage bags where you can put sweaters and so forth in a bag and put a vacuum cleaner on it, and you can occupy less space. That's basically the same principle here. So we removed the air, so we created a vacuum inside the bag, and so that way there was an imbalance of pressure, and it was made it very, very difficult for you to move. Thanks so much for helping out. That's a great job. Let's move this out here. Pick this up and move this out. What's the time? What's that?
22.
Okay, need the gloves and dry ice. Okay, this time I need a volunteer with a particular requirement. The requirement is you have to be a little taller. So, and there's a particular volunteer who has been the object of some of my pranks for the last, well, for quite a few years. Where's Dave? Hey, Dave. See, did he sneak around the corner there? He's talking? Hey, Dave. Hey, Dave. Come on up, Dave. This is Dave Johnson. Dave was one of the original BEEP students, 1973, 1974. So Dave was one of the reasons I got really wet on Isle Royal. We were pike fishing on this lake, and we were casting out some plugs. I said, you know, it's quite often the pike kind of hang in under some of the brush.
I still have the lure.
And so he was casting, and I went out and did a couple wraps around the branch and down in. And I said, well, I'll go out and get it for you. So as I was climbing out this deadfall over this lake, this pike came and grabbed the lure. And so I was climbing out on this tree, untangling the lure with a pike on the other end. And that was one of our great experiences. Dave was also in one of the first class at City High. So he's had quite a few experiences along the line. And Dave probably has the distinction for traveling the greatest distance to be here today. Dave, you flew in from?
Bordeaux, France.
So what we're going to do here, Dave, this is sometimes what I refer to as an anti-gravity chamber, but I know that you're not going to buy into that one. What I want you to do is I want you to take the straw out of the bubbles and just blow some bubbles. Okay? Okay, where are the bubbles going? They're going down. Why? Gravity is pulling them down, right? So sometimes what I'll try to do is to convince people that I can turn off gravity, but I know Dave's not going to buy into that one. But Dave, I want you to blow some bubbles very gently into the bubble chamber.
You're floating minor sinker.
And so we see that the bubbles are going in and they're floating around. Okay? Now, with younger students, I'd say, oh, am I able to turn off gravity in there? You know that's not possible, right? So something else is going on. What's going on in there? There's something in the bottom. Dry ice. And dry ice is made of carbon dioxide. It's a solid carbon dioxide, and it will go through sublimation directly into a gas, and it's called dry ice because it's not wet. But we can blow some bubbles in there, and even though we cannot see the carbon dioxide, Dave had a little effort with that one going in there, created some turbulence. That's all right. That's okay. And so this is just another way of trying to show the action of gases. We saw some action of gases with the air pressure, and let's see if we can get some floating closer to the top. If we turn this, tilt it a little bit and let the gas out the bottom, then we can see that they will flow out right with the carbon dioxide that's escaping right out the bottom of the chamber. Okay? Thanks, Dave. Appreciate your help.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, now what we're going to do next is, Lori? Could I get you to come up, please? Lori is another one of our original Blandford students, like 1973, 74. And we're going to come on over here. And Lori, I'm going to need you to select 2 other volunteers, please. Would you clear off both small white tables? Okay. And over here we have Zach. Hi, Zach. And over here we have Catherine. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge Lori to a race. And Zach, would you hold that end of that bag, please? Lori, would you hold this end over here? Okay. Catherine, would you come this way, please? And if you would hold that end of that bag over there. extend out that way just a little bit. And we're going to be back to back, Lori. What I'm going to do is to challenge you to blow up that bag as quickly as you possibly can. We need a countdown of 3, 2, 1, go.
3, 2, 1, go.
I'm finished. How you doing? Yeah. What? It looks like you have a little ways to go there yet, Lord. Hold on to that. Hold on really well. Okay, so there must... Hold on really... No, don't move. I need you to stay right there and hold on. There we go. Okay. What's going on? There must be something... What were you doing to try to blow that up? Oh, you had the balloon right to your mouth, and you were the bag, and you're blowing up just like a balloon, right? There's a trick here in using air pressure, because Lord, I didn't have the bag right to my mouth. What I did, watch this one. You hold the bag out about 6 inches from your mouth, open it up, take a deep breath, then one steady blow right into the bag. Okay? Just like that. These are called Bernoulli bags. This is based on the Bernoulli principle that moving air has less internal pressure than air that is still. So if you create a moving column of air inside, you are actually creating a decreased pressure zone, and all of the air in the room is trying to help you blow up that bag. It's the same principle by which a bird can fly. Because as the air is moving over the top of a bird's wing, it is moving faster than is on the bottom, and it creates the lift. Same thing with airplane. Thanks so much. Well, good to see you again, too. Thank you. Okay. Should we wrap it up? Okay. What's that? I can't undo that. That's okay. Well, as with most things, whenever you are in teaching, you always prepare about twice as much as you have time to deliver. And so what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears. And I think Mary Jane is going to be coming up next, right? Yep. And I want to thank you for participating, especially those who volunteered so nicely. That was great. And thanks for letting me to be here tonight and to share some of the things with you that I've been doing. It's great to be a part of this program. It's tremendous that it's been going on.
Thank you, Larry.
So long.
Well, we're going to do kind of a nostalgia trip on Blandford Nature Center in Beeps. Some of you may see your picture. I don't know what all's there, but you're going to see some familiar things. And we'll just kind of talk a little bit about how all this came about. Because as many of you know, this was Collins Woods, and this was the place where you're sitting right now, was George and Margaret Frost's 24-acre farm. And what are those little things? And,
You should know.
and yeah, I haven't seen them up close that much. And over the years, after I'd played here and had fun as a kid, it was nice to know that I could bring groups from Grand Rapids schools out here and enjoy this kind of a place the way I did when I was a kid growing up in this neighborhood. So we'll see. Some of you may see some things that you are familiar with, and there may be something new. So watch. Okay. Now we can have the darkness. Ooh, goody. Ooh, goody. All right. One thing about Blandford Nature Center is that we never knew when we came to work in the morning what was going to happen that day. So all of these beautiful things that we got used to seeing here around this 143 acres, as it's turned out, is an adventure and continues to be an adventure. And a lot of people said way back in the mid-60s when this whole idea, by the way, I call Blandford Nature Center Serendipity Center, because a lot of things happened because we didn't really plan it that way, but it happened anyhow. And so many people said, as I was going around talking about having a nature center out here, well, what's out there? And I said, nature. And, well, what kind of stuff? Well, it's got a woods, beautiful woods. Trees have been growing here up to 200 years. It's got Brandywine Creek and a water feature, lots of little ponds and things. And you know how kids are, just like I did when I came here with my friends. We had lots of fun just playing in the ponds, playing in the creek. I haven't found my initials on any tree yet, but I hope I never do. Well, as the time went and we began to acquire property here, why, we wheedled somebody to come and scrape a road from the end of the, well, where the gate is now. Well, we needed a little road, and it was just a mud rut for a while. And you notice that field over there at the left. Well, there's a field over on the right, too. Well, we had to keep it that way, and the city wasn't very excited about us burning anything, and so we had to mow it every other year. And that was not a fun thing to do. We waited until almost anybody that might have been living in there or nesting in there had moved on to other places, and we kept it mowed. Well, as many of you know, I retired in 1990, and I kept dropping little hints. You know, I really didn't want to be a bossy old lady around here, but it's kind of hard not to be. And so I kept saying, you know, that field is getting kind of overgrown, and yeah, we used to mow it every other year, and yeah, well, that's what happened. Some of you can remember just a very few years ago, that's the way it looked. And it was really hard to deal with because it was so thick that it wasn't good for anything. We didn't even know there was a pond in there because water areas in the Nature Center had changed over the years. And there was a pond in there. Goodness sakes, what are we going to do about this? Well, we cleared it. And so we're into, well, Anushka said she's been here 4 years. Well, this is the scene she saw when she first came. And it took about a month to clear off 20 years of growth. We had cottonwood trees that were growing there that had 20 rings on them. So, you know, a lot of growing had been going on. So we got this all cleared. We had a wonderful pile of wood chips to put on the trails. We didn't have to get wood chips from any place else for quite a while because we had a lot of them. Had a lot of firewood for sugar bush and to burn in the cabin when our good cooks were in there. And then finally, just a couple of years ago, our volunteer coordinator turned out to also be a land management specialist, Jessie Schulte. And wow, is she a whiz. And in fact, our staff is just a whole bunch of whizzes. And I'm just really, really excited about what's going on around here. And we managed to work into, or they did, I didn't have anything to do with this, to have a group come in and have a burn. So here they are getting ready for their burn. Oh boy, this was exciting. Did it ever bring out the neighbors because they wonder what in the world we were doing cutting down our woods? And I said, that was not a woods. That was a mess. And so here they go. Here they go. Oh my goodness, look at all this stuff. We're burning some of the stuff down that is invasive, that shouldn't be here to begin with. We can get rid of some of that stuff and then begin to work toward an old Michigan prairie, but it's going to be forever to do that, so don't worry about some of your favorite flowers being gone forever because this is a forever project. So here we are burning things off, and we had a trail all the way around through there, kind of a pioneer plant trail that we used years ago to show people that when early settlers came into this part of the country, they brought a lot of seeds either on purpose or inadvertently over with them, and things got kind of going and growing and mixing with some of the natives that were here. So we decided we better have a path that we could get around in this business area a little bit better. So our meadow is gradually coming back. Well, in the meadow part, right behind the log cabin, we have a playscape. I didn't know what a playscape was. Anushka was trying to tell me about a playscape because that's one of the modern things I didn't know about when I was director here. Well, it is really, really fun for kids, lots of little bitty kids. I was there last year doing something else in the meadow, And there was a little boy, well, there were more than one little boy there, and he was working so hard, and I went up to him and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm making a pie. There's a water spigot there, so you can make lots of nice mud." And I said, "Oh, what kind of pie?" And he said, "Blueberry." He was about 4 years old, I think. And then one day when I was sitting behind the desk in the main building, a lady came in and she was toting about a 2-year-old girl under her arm, and she was heading for the restroom because this kid was so muddy that she didn't want to put her in the car. So this has really been a very, very popular kind of a thing. So I'm really excited about it. But going back a little ways, when we began earning some money, the Museum Association was trying to get enough money so we could build a building here, because I was bringing kids out, and we were just kind of lucky we had a lot of big trees because there weren't any restrooms. And then one day, well, you can read between the lines, can't you? Anyhow, then one day, a little kid, I think she was a 3rd grader from Stocking School, she fell in the creek, got soaking wet. I didn't have any place to dry her off or anything to dry her with. And so I began to talk to W.D. Frank Frankfurter, who was our director at the time, and he said, "Well, dream a little bit. The Museum Association would like to have a meaty project." Well, they got one, I'll tell you. And so our artist at the museum drew a rendition of what the architects, Frank and Stein, believe it or not, I tell you, no lie, from Lansing, and that was what they did. And finally, in January 1968, there's Mr. Blandford, Victor Blandford, who with the Blandford family gave us the first 17 acres of the 143 that we now have. And he has the red scarf on, and he was one of the groundbreakers. And Mr. Baldwin, Dr. Baldwin, is already scooping there. And some of the kids from Frost School, and Mr. Frankfurter is there, the guy over on the right with the tannish coat on. And we broke ground. Well, the director of events going on building this was Dick Damstra, and he announced to all of the bulldozer operators and all the truck operators, "You've got 10 feet away from the foundation of this building to go play with your big toys. 10 feet. And they said, "What?" No, they didn't want to do that. But they did. They did very well. And they really, this was the Builders and Suppliers Association, a builders group in Grand Rapids, that got behind this. And they said, "Well, you've got about a $150,000 building here, but let's see what we can do with labor and materials and put it together." And it was under $60,000 when we got it all built. And that was really, 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 really something. And there were so many people that I could talk about that helped to build that building. One was Tom Damstra, probably a distant relative of Dick's, only nobody knew it. And he was a retired stonemason. And he collected 44 tons of native fieldstone from all the gravel pits around this area. And he supervised the placement of every single one of them. And so when you look at all the stonework there, you're really seeing the work of a man who had already retired. Well, the kids in the neighborhood were over here playing just like I had always played here when I was their age. I grew up on a chicken farm over here on Collindale, it's called now. It used to be Collinwood. And can you imagine a farm being out here now with all these ranch houses? Well, we sometimes had 5,000 chickens on that farm. So times were different way, way back when I was a kid. But these kids came and they said, "What you doing?" You know, we were messing with their playground, and I understood. And so we told them what we were doing. Of course, some of the adults wondered if we were trying to build a nudist colony out here. What was a nature center but a nudist colony? So anyhow, yeah, I kid you not. I kid you not. And so these kids were around, and we thought, boy, they could make or break this place. And so we made them part of it. We made them our junior aides. And they had a little owl patch on their sleeves, just as the staff did and just as our grown-up volunteers did. And so here's some of the kids. And if you've been in the main building, you know that upstairs, we got all those beams. They were up there. Can you imagine Myosha going absolutely stark raving mad to see anybody doing that sort of thing now? They washed windows, they swept floors, they did all kinds of things besides climbing on ladders. Well, just before I retired, a man came in and he was towing this little 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old had a junior aid patch on his sleeve. And Daddy was a former junior aide, and he had come back to show me that his son now wore the patch on his sleeve. And I've heard from more junior aides who tell me about all the naughty things they did over here. But anyhow, it was really wonderful. And then we began bringing groups over. We began getting volunteers that were grown-ups too. We called them bland aides. Some of them didn't like that term, but anyhow, I thought it was kind of appropriate at the time. And some of the classes that would come, my bland aid volunteers would handle snakes. And here, in fact, here's one of the beeps from way back. And she's holding a hognose snake, and you can probably identify. And I was scared to death of snakes. My mother was a city girl, and she couldn't bear snakes. So I had to get over that. If I had my volunteers and the kids all handling snakes like they were the best things in sliced bread, by golly, I had to learn how to hold a snake. And believe me, that was a job to do. Well, then we began to find out, after kids had been out here, they went home and over the dinner table were telling where they'd been that day when they came out here on field trips. And so adults began to come. And then we needed more volunteers for more things. This is, let me see, I think Standale Garden Club that has been coming for years and years, making garlands for our winter harvest, our winter special event that we have. And then sometimes people would come. You know, this has always been a we place. It's never been, that's your nature center. It is our nature center. And that's the most wonderful feeling and the most wonderful thing to hear, that people feel as though they can make suggestions, they can come here and enjoy themselves, be part of this place. One day, quite early on, there was a man that lived fairly close in the neighborhood, and he was sitting looking out our wildlife windows, and he said, you got a lot of squirrels around here. And I said, yeah, we sure do. And he said, they're too fat. And I said, yeah, I know they are. They're eating all the birdseed. And he said, I'll be back. And so he disappeared, and he came back after a little while, and he had scrounged in his garage, and he had found a bicycle wheel he didn't need anymore, and some door springs, which he affixed to the wheel, and he got the thing on a pole so that the wheel would spin, and then he put ears of field corn under the springs of the door. I have seen versions of this thing all over the place. Now they sell them in bird food stores and I guess other places too. But it makes the squirrels work a little bit for the food, and of course it amuses the heck out of the visitors that are out there watching. Yeah. But that we feeling also is kind of fun. When we would have a special event, people just came and made themselves to home. I love that. I love that. We had a Christmas event one time. Well, we said Christmas in the Cabin is what we called it at that point. And we were crazy enough to make carameled apples. If you don't think that's a mess, hoi, hoi, hoi. And so here was a family spread out upstairs in the main building, making themselves right at home, eating their carameled apples, which we found on windowsills and the handles of the doors, the knobs were sticky for the next week. And they were just making themselves to home. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love that. Well, after the building had gotten all opened up in the fall of 1968 and we went into full-time business out here, the front yard where all of the big equipment had come in and all of the materials for the building, that looked like a mess. That was all subsoil and barren and ugh. So we said, what can we do with that? Well, several groups volunteered to give us some funds to make a mini nature center out there, because we had a lot of visitors that would come that couldn't walk down in the ravines. We had mothers come with little kids in strollers. We had people come that absolutely could not walk around our regular trails, but they needed to have an opportunity to see what was going on in nature. So we decided to make the front yard a mini nature center. And our first maintenance supervisor, Len Vandertorn, is telling, let me see, these were Kent Country Club ladies who had invested in this, along with Campfire Girls and, oh, I don't know, downtown Kiwanis. I can't even tell you all the different people that have been involved in this place out here. And we have a boardwalk. If you haven't been over there for a while, you can walk it and see all the things we did to make a mini nature center. So that was the boardwalk, and then we wanted a water feature. You got to have a water feature now. So we fixed one, and it's being remodeled as we speak right now with not just the bridge across, but we're going to have a collecting deck. Another big group that's going to come and volunteer in the next week or so is going to finish that up. So after we got all that taken care of and filled the pond, and this is the way, well, it's kind of dry right now. We need to have a little bit bigger water feature because we haven't had enough rain recently. But then we thought, you know, people really ought to have an opportunity to feel like they're in the big woods. And so we said, okay, and we will have a woodland overlook. And it's right outside the building, and it's right next to the mini nature center, which is now the Helen Stiles Trail. And this was wonderful. We've had more events take place out there. If you look carefully, you'll see there are people in wheelchairs that are out there. And any time of the year, it's not just a summertime thing. It's wonderful to go to the overlook and see what it looks like in the wintertime. We try and keep it cleared off. And now we're going to have to build a new overlook because this one's getting pretty ancient. So we're going to have to build a new one. Anybody interested in building I don't mean you physically, I mean you financially. Pardon me, I got to get those little plugs in now and then. Okay, this is what it looks like from the air. The big crescent of woods that was part of Collins Farm many years ago when I came here as a kid. And in the lower part of the picture, you can see the farm that we finally acquired. And so we were pretty much in business, and we got a $200,000 grant from the 1968 Recreation Bond Fund through the DNR that the public voted in 1968. I didn't ask for that money. The head of Michigan Parks I talked to at a conference, and he said, you really ought to get some of that money for Blandford Nature Center for more land. And I said, yeah, but that all goes through the park department, and I'm from the museum. Oh, he said, oh, and that ended the conversation. And in a couple of weeks, our museum director got a notation from the DNR saying, well, you've got $200,000 for land acquisition because Glenn Gregg had gone home he was head of Michigan Parks, and he went home and put it in for us. I mean, talk about serendipity. Wow, this was the beginning of getting a lot more property. So we could do a lot of stuff. We had teacher workshops. We had Girl Scout and Boy Scout workshops. We had daytime workshops. We had nighttime hikes. It's wonderful to go out and hoot up the owls at night. Sometimes it rains when we do that, but that's okay. We do it anyhow. And then one day, W.D. Frankfurter, Frank Frankfurter, who was director in the 70s, called me one day and he said, how would you like a log cabin? And I said, huh? Yeah, he said, one of my friends came in this morning. He was out in the Wayland area over the weekend, and he saw a family taking down a log cabin. It was built in 1853, and they're taking it down. Their mother lived there until 1969 with all kinds of coats of stuff on the outside of it. But we built her a new house back on the property, so we don't know what we're going to do with this. Well, so Frank said, how would you like it out there? And I thought, you know what? We're trying to get people with their feet back on the ground. They need to know what came before them. We're telling them what's going on now. We also need to project into the future. But let's go back a few years and see how we got the way we are now and what's good about that and what we want to change about that. So Len Vandertorn went down and got the log cabin, brought it up here and put it back together again. And we had ourselves the log cabin as you see it. We're trying to baby it as much as we can because of the history behind it. We can build a new log cabin, but it wouldn't have the history of the family that raised 11 kids in that family. So that's kind of fun. But you know, after we got going with the historical part of our place, we got a whole bunch of people coming in with animals. Sometimes the animals were hurt, sometimes they were just a little bit too young, and I kept turning them down because that's expensive. Now, don't get me wrong when I talk about how much everything costs, but it's very time consuming, and we had a very, very small staff. Barb Hogue is sitting here right now. She was with me right from the very beginning and saw all this stuff happening, and we didn't have time to play with all these little animals and feed them and all that sort of stuff. But finally, I gave in one day. A couple of kids came in with a very, very sad-looking little screech owl, and so we began to take in some animals. And we didn't have any place for them. We had a laboratory, or we planned for a laboratory. Well, that became the animal hospital, and many of you have all kinds of stories you could tell about the animal hospital. Yes, indeed. We threw some cages together, and well, you know, we didn't like to see those animals in cages. And so when they began feeling better and really ought to have a little bit more space, when they were compatible and wouldn't eat each other for lunch, we turned them loose in the building. And so people would come in. We had a library downstairs at that time, and people would come in and they'd be going over our books in the library, and all of a sudden one of the bookends would move. And my office was right next door, and so I'd hear a little scream, and I knew one of the owls had moved. But it was always fun to see the bookends there. And then under the steps going upstairs, there was a big log, which is now in our learning lab, and we had, well, here's another bookend. It was a bookend for a while. But this was our first long-eared owl. We called it Sarge because he had, I don't know, had only one wing, and so when it got agitated, it would raise one wing like it was saluting, so it became Sarge. Yeah, well, Sarge was on this big log under the steps, and one day there was a busload of senior citizens that were there, and they were staring and staring and staring, and that, you know, Sarge would look, and then he'd blink his eyes, and he'd wiggle a little bit, and they looked into my office where I was sitting, and I do naughty things a lot. And so I said to these two ladies who were standing there trying to figure out about this owl, I said, I pull the strings from in here. And they looked at me and nodded kind of blankly, and oh, goody, they didn't hear me. Well, pretty soon one of the ladies was back, and she had another lady with her, and she pointed at me and she said, she pulls the strings from in there. Well, I try not to tell too many lies, but anyhow. Yeah, well, one day I had a call from a lady from Traverse City, and she said, we just, a few weeks ago, plucked a snowy owl out of a vat of caustic at some factory. And she said, it's a mess. It's got scabs all over it. Its bill is almost eaten off by acids. It's a real mess. Its talons are gone. We don't know what to do. We've been trying to take care of it. Can we bring it into you? And I said, yeah, sure. I didn't know what we were going to do with it either. But this is the before, if you will, and this is the after. Yeah. So you see, we do some pretty good things with animals over there, and I could tell you stories all the rest of the night about that, but I won't do that. But a lot of our calls come in by telephone, and it's always amazing. I mean, I'm still here on Wednesday mornings, and I take animal calls all the time. I won't bother you with that either, but it really is something. I must have gotten some slides out of whack because I thought, I didn't tell you the whole story of the log cabin. This is the way it looked. This is the way it looked when it was in place in rural Wayland area. And when they tried to take down the kitchen part on the back, it just dissolved. It was just falling all apart. And so Len could bring back only the solid logs, and he numbered them all, and with a crew of helpers, he put it all back together again, and then the bugs began to work. Mr. William Tyler Robinson, who built this thing back in 1853, I don't think he'd ever made a log cabin before, and I don't think he knew he was supposed to take the bark off the outside. Maybe he was in a hurry, and he had a bunch of kids that were helping him, and they didn't know what they were doing either. But pretty soon, little piles of fuzzy, woody stuff began to appear. Powder post beetles were deeply, deeply embedded in those. So finally, we thought we got to do something. And so we had experts come in. Most of them said, burn it down. Have a big hot dog roast or something. And we said, no, we want to save it as long as we can. So one guy said, well, I know about 2 different kinds of epoxy resins, and maybe that'll hold it for a few more years. So took the whole darn thing together, apart again. And here you see one of our volunteers putting one of the resins on the logs. And then we had another kind of resin because we had to rebuild some of the logs, and we had to chink with new stuff because the old kind of stuff wasn't going to work anymore. So if you examine those logs closely while you're here this weekend, you will see that some of them are kind of man-tampered with. Okay, well, while we were doing all this remodeling, we decided to put the kitchen back on. Of course, it was much younger, but anyhow, we needed that room. And so here goes up the kitchen with Jerry Molesky, who was then our maintenance supervisor. And then we had an exterminating company come in and put a big plastic tent over the whole works and just fumigate the daylights out of that thing, because we were hoping to kill whatever was eating up the logs. Well, it sure looked good. Man, there we were with our cabin all put back together again. And I think it took, maybe a month before I began to see the little piles of dust coming again. Those powder post beetles were so embedded in there. But I went around to places like Goodwill and Salvation Army and tried to collect kind of mixed up messes of chinaware and silverware. And we were still attached to the museum in those days, so the exhibits department made us some fake food. And so we set the table for 13, Mom and Pop and 11 kids. And that's kind of hard to believe, but it happened in that building. And then, of course, once we had the cabin all put together, well, gee, it ought to have a barn. So APBs were always going out from here. And so we put out a little, we need a little barn to go with our log cabin. And we had a call from the Van Houtens, and they were going to build a new big garage where they had a carriage house they really didn't want to remodel. And so at that time, Len Vandertoorn was still here. He took his trusty chainsaw, and he went out to the Van Houtens, and he sawed the carriage barn in half. And he rented some city equipment that we could do in those days, and he brought half back on a big flatbed, and then he brought the other half back, and he put them both together, and he put barn siding on the outside, and we had a barn. Well, as long as we had to have a barn, and we had the cabin, we better have a garden in between. And so our summer program kids planted our very first garden. And the kids thought it was so funny, you know, and all the third grades in the Grand Rapids system were coming out for a half-a-day program in Pioneer Living, and they were amazed. They would go in, and of course they'd ask about, well, how would we get the rugs clean in here? Well, you get out the vacuum. Well, we don't have one. There isn't any electricity here. Well, how would you do that? Well, you see that thing on the wall? Well, it's a rug beater. And you put the rug out there on the fence, and you beat the living daylights out of it. That's your vacuum cleaner. Oh, my goodness. You know, and where's the TV? And where's your plumbing? Well, just one there. So we had a lot of fun. One day, one of our volunteers came in, and she said, a friend of mine has 2 teenage daughters, and we've hatched a plan. We pass it past you to see if you'd like for us to do it. They said, we would like to take over the cabin for a week, 5 days, and pretend we're living here, but we'll go home at night. But we'll pretend that we're living here, and we'll go over to the farm, and we'll barter with the farmer for some stuff that we need. And I said, oh, go for it, by all means. And so they went over to the farm, and they milked one of the goats, because they had to have some milk. And I don't think any of them ever milked a goat before, or let alone milked anything. And then they bartered. They took some jam they'd made over to the farm, and they bartered for a couple of chickens. So they brought the dead chickens over here, and they had to defeather them and clean them and all that. And that was very fascinating to everybody that was watching now that go on. And then we didn't have, our only stove that we had at that point didn't have any bottom in it, so we couldn't use it. And so they had to cook outside. So, of course, we got plenty of advertising, and people began to come. It was so funny to watch them because here was all this pioneer stuff brewing, and all these ladies running around in these long gowns, and here were all these people with their little plastic implements and their coolers sitting around the fire, eating their lunch, and here were the pioneer ladies doing their thing. Well, at the end of the week, the ladies said they were going to make lunch for the staff. And during the course of the morning, we had 2 ladies from the Netherlands who were vacationing here. And they were so fascinated with what was going on that we invited them to lunch. So here you see them in the blue over on the right, and they're eating with the staff. I would love to have been in their living room when they got back to the Netherlands. Quite something. Well, we decided that this was a call for a special event. And so we invented Back to the Earth Day. You know, what did people used to do a long time ago? It was just as valid to do now, but nobody did it anymore. And so we had people that did do those things come over here and demonstrate. And here you see a new chair seat being made. And this kid's making his own butter. We had plenty of crackers and things for him to use the butter on. And we had ice cream being made and all those good things. And it was amazing. The kids would come, and the pioneer toys were fascinating to them. They loved those simple things. No texting, no using the thumbs. They were just out here doing they loved this stuff. Run a hoop, oh yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And they had so much fun doing it. But one of the things they really like to do, and they do it when we have Fall Harvest Festival, we cut all kinds of bladderwort, not bladderwort, what am I trying to say? Anyhow, there's an invasive bush that grows all over the place. Unfortunately, they sell it at nurseries now. Anyhow, we got all those things, and we make frames for the scarecrows. I don't know how many scarecrows I have seen go out of the driveway with, clamped down on the top of a car, just like a dead deer. Yeah, really, really something wonderful to see. Well, we're always running out of space, always running out of space. So another APB went out. Please, anybody got a schoolhouse we can have? Yeah, you'd be surprised the calls that came in. But Cecil Doyle, who worked for the Kennewa system, and the Kennewa system had just been consolidated, and he bought Star Schoolhouse that was in their system. And so he called me and he said, yeah, I've got a school, and you can have it, but you got to get it right away. Well, we didn't own the land where I wanted to put it. So what to do? Well, he said, you got to get it now because I want to build a duplex here and they're going to change the zoning and I can't do that. So, well, take it or leave it. Well, I couldn't really give up on that. So we had contributions of $10,000 to get the schoolhouse to our place. Wonderful. So I called the utilities, telephone company, consumers, and said, I know that we're going to get in the way of some of your wires. Will you please give me an estimate of how much money it's going to cost to do that? Well, I had a call from, I don't know whether it was a telephone company or consumers, and the man said, well, I quit counting at $10,000. And I said, ooh, goody for you. That's all I've got to do the whole project. Well, he said, I'll tell you something. If you can get the roof off of that thing, it'll take it down to the 18-foot level, and you can get through most of the wires. I said, oh, fine, fine, fine. So we got a crew to go out and take the roof off, and they put heavy plastic over the top, and it rained for the next 9 days. Yeah, we couldn't get a mover for 9 days. You know, things don't always fall into place just the way we'd like them. So after the 9th day, here comes the school. Didn't look very good. Ooh, looked awful. The closer it came, the worse it looked. Here comes down Hilburn. Mr. Frankfurter was on vacation. I was so glad. I mean, we had permission to do this because everything had to be passed through the board and all this good stuff downtown. But this was a mess. This was really a mess. Well, here it is where our store used to be, and now it's our learning lab because we're running out of space again. Here was this thing, and the staff stood around and looked at it, And I said, should I go over to D&W and get a bunch of some more stuff? Sounded like a good idea. Whew. But we had a lot of good student help at that time, one of whom was Larry Fiegel over on the right, and Steve Hills was on the other end of the scaffolding with him. That place it had to be gutted, absolutely gutted. But and it had to sit right where our learning lab is, right on the side of the driveway for a whole year, up on stilts before we could finally own the land where it now sits. But finally the big day came. Oh my goodness, here we got a basement all made because Larry's going to have a lapidary shop down in the basement. Ooh, wow, that's going to be so neat. Well, the building was kind of a mess, and somebody said, what color do you want it? And I said, I'd like a red schoolhouse. So it got to be a red schoolhouse. And I've seen more pictures that were taken of that. And then it was white back again for a while. But if you will notice when you're over there, it is also red again. And that was really neat. And we didn't quite get the lapidary shop down in the basement. One day I came back from a meeting, and there was the fire department there. And the Grand Rapids fire chief said to me, we're going to close you down. And I said, what? Yes, he said, you're going to plan to turn this schoolhouse into a 2-story frame building with that basement under it. And I said, well? And he said, there's a new law. You can't educate in a 2-story frame building anymore. And he said, I said, I have a letter from the state fire marshal saying I can do this. And he said, I'm over him. He said, the only way I'll let you use that school is to walk the people in the front door and out the back door. And I said, well, that's not what we got the schoolhouse for. So guess what? We never got a lapidary shop in the basement. We had to fill it in. But oh, how much fun we've had with that schoolhouse. Here is a 5th grade from Stocking School, I think. And the room mothers made Thanksgiving dinner for them. And except for the incongruous looking little cartons of milk, everything else was pretty good. Even the boys could strip down to, it was warm in there, we got nice heat in there, and so got them stripped down in their Indian style. So that has been really wonderful. Well then, by this time, Jerry Molesky had taken over the maintenance chores, and he said to me one day, you know, the R.B. Stillwell horseshoe shop that was given to us, it's sitting behind the east building, and it's just filled with stuff. And wouldn't it be good, because this thing had been in Jamestown for years and years, and old R.B. he'd worked it right up until he died. And so we asked to Mr. Frankfurt if it'd be okay to have the horseshoe shop out here, and he said, oh yeah, that'd be great. And so we had blacksmith shop, or blacksmith classes, and now we have a full-blown R.B. Stillwell working blacksmith shop again, and we've trained any number of blacksmiths who come out on special occasions. We'd like to have it open all the time, but we really can't do that. We'd love to. Anybody want to do that? Okay. Yeah, we'll take you. Won't pay anything, but we'll take you. And so we have wonderful, wonderful blacksmiths that make beautiful things there now. Well, early on when we started our classes here, we had a lot of maple trees, and our staff, our growing staff, of what, 3 or 4, decided that we ought to really have a sugar bush. So we began to tap a few trees, and what were we going to do? Well, outside of the main building, we had a little woodshed, and so we got a pan and got it divided up so the sap would move from one spot to another, and we had to watch it really carefully because when it got down to about 3 gallons, it would scorch the pan right quick unless we got it in, put it in a big soup kettle, and boiled it down farther in our building. And we always set aside March for sugar bush and hoped Mother Nature would agree with us. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But by the end of March, if you put your hand on the wall in the kitchen, you stuck because there was so much syrup residue that was just in the air there that made the walls sticky. So don't ever try to do this in your kitchen unless you want sticky walls. Well, after we had done this and it was successful, making syrup. We knew we could make syrup. Well, why don't we have a public pancake supper and invite the public, and we'll use our syrup? Okay, well, we'll have it right here in this building. Well, nowadays, lots of rules and regulations have changed, and we can no longer have gas units in the building. We have to cook things outside or in a different manner anyhow. But those rules were not in effect way back then. And so, well, okay, where are we going to cook these? Well, we'll take all the animals out of the animal hospital. We'll put them out in the workshop for overnight. We will Clorox the walls, the ceiling, the floors, and everything in that room, and that's where we'll bake the pancakes. Can you imagine us doing anything like we did it. And we thought, well, there might be like, oh, I think we managed to figure that we'd be really lucky if we got 750 people, and we had them all in the building. Well, we had 1,000. Whoa! As time went on, those thousands really crowded places, and but we had really quite a thing. And we needed a real sugar house, a real honest-to-goodness sugar house. So another APB went out. One day I answered the phone, and there was a gentleman on the other end. I didn't know who he was. And he said to me, before he told me who he was, he said, my wife just loved to walk the trails of Blandford Nature Center. And he burst into tears. And I didn't even know who I was talking to. And he said, she died recently, and I would love to build you a sugar house in her memory. So if you ever get in our sugar house, Anastasia Kenyon's picture and a little plaque is in our sugar house because husband Lewis gave us $5,000 to build a real honest-to-goodness sugar house. So you see, Serendipity Center, I tell you, that's what it is. And it was put together just like all of our old buildings with lots and lots of loving care and detail to it. So take a good look at it next time you go past it. And then we were really in business, really, with a real honest-to-goodness pan, and lots of kids coming every year and getting stuff on their fingers that they never tasted before because they had store-bought corn syrup to put on their pancakes. This was the real stuff. But as time went by, finally, we reached the point where we were super saturated. I can't believe the people that stood in line the very last year we had it in our main building over there. I wouldn't have stood in any line for anything. And these people were standing for pancakes with syrup on them. I couldn't believe it. But anyhow, lots and lots of good stuff. So we got permission to be over at Frost School. Took 100 volunteers to man the tables and pass out sausages and cook pancakes and do all those kinds of things. And then we like to do these old-time things. And for many, many years we had the 3rd Michigan Volunteers, the Civil War reenactors that would come and spend a weekend here. And they would cook here. I would look into some of their pots and pans and, oh, I hope they had a lot of Tums with them because that stuff really didn't look very edible to me. And the ladies would come too because, you know, they did follow the troops during the Civil War in many cases, and so they'd be doing all this fancy work. Well, we had summer programs for kids too, and Larry and Connie were in, Connie Fiegel and Larry Fiegel were in on all of our early days of helping the kids through summer programs. And this is Connie Fiegel, and she is experiencing a pond with a bunch of kids. Now, how much more can you experience a pond than that? Yes, and Larry, well, the animal hospital had a bunch of lapidary equipment in it for a long time, and he's working here, and Barb said she still has a ring that her son Brad made a ring for you, Barb. Yep. Yep. And here's the kids working on the lapidary equipment. They turned out a lot of interesting stuff. Well, one day we got together. You know, we had to decompress after a day of lots of kids because we had usually 100 in the morning and 100 in the afternoon, and we were pooped. And so we gathered in the volunteers' room for a cup of coffee and see how the day went. Somebody said, wow, we wish we could have these kids longer. And, well, people said, yeah, how you going to manage to do that? And so this was when the beeps were born. Now, I don't think, if any of you see yourselves in any of these pictures, let me know. This was first year beeps. Well, it just so happened that the Grand Rapids Public Schools were looking for some innovative programs for kids who needed a challenge. And so they came, well, I knew a lot of teachers in those years because I'd been going around to the schools for a long time. And so we had an opportunity to draw up a scheme, which we did. And we turned it over to Connie and Larry to devise an outline of what they might do if they could have kids for a whole year. And that was, you know, out of the realm of possibility. But by golly, that went into the pot with several other ideas in May of 1973, and in September 1973, we had our first class. We could have only 30 kids, and they were over at C.A. Frost School. And this was live outdoors kind of stuff. And they did all of their schoolwork with the idea that they were part of the environment and they would learn with the environment all around them. They even turned into junior naturalists, and they would take little kindergartners and first and second graders around and tell them all about what they were learning outside. Well, one day, fairly early on, although Rick Gillette was here, and he came dragging up with the kids after they had been experiencing a pond. And I said, Rick, what are you going to do? You can't put these kids on a bus. He said, oh, well, maybe not. And so we hooked up the hose and we hosed them all down before they went home that night. Well, then, you know, we really, the kids wanted to have their camping trip at the end of the year, but that's pretty expensive thing to do. So they needed to earn some money. So they devised an idea that they would raise chickens at the farm. And this was their first chicken coop. I don't know where that dryer door came from or whatever that is. But you know, they scrounged it from someplace. And these are organic chickens, I'll tell you. And of course, they set up a chicken business. And those of you who have been beeps or know anything about beeps know that they have their own chicken business every year. See, they had special extra large eggs for me one day that they gave me. And every year they have a new name. And of course, they love their chickens. Many of you have gone through this. They love their chickens. And this is this year's flock. The ones you see in the coop right now, that's one of those in this year's kids. Is she here tonight? I don't think. Huh? She was here? She was here. Yeah, she didn't know I was going to show her a picture. But you see, darn chickens, they don't know any better. But this is what they do at the end of the year. They go up to Ludington State Park and Nordhaus Dunes, and they backpack, and they learn skills and hear about them, and then they go and experience them. These are lifetime things these kids can take with them. They will never, ever forget. I never go any place but what I run into a parent or a former beep, and without a doubt, they just explode with, this was my best year of school. And so, and I don't prump them, I don't prime them, they just say that because this was really so. Well, they finally outgrew Frost School because Frost School needed to go on and become an environmental themed school. And so the Grand Rapids school system brought in portables. They were old, beat-up portables when they came. They didn't leak yet, but they were old, beat-up portables. And the teachers, by this time, Sherry McKay and Jeff Lindy were teachers, and they tried to fix things up as best they could. But you know, it's not the building. We love this building. We absolutely love this building. It's wonderful to have it. But it's not the building that makes the program. It's the teachers that we have had in this program that makes it really buzz and really be important. And we hope that it always will be that way because it takes very, very, very special people to be teachers in this kind of a program, and you better believe it. Groundbreaking for this building. There I am, the little gray-haired grandma there. Even the mayor was here. He had to get up and because they had, you know, the Hartwells had 2 beeps here over the years. And so he was really, really pleased. My cousin, Maureen Quinn Slade, is on the Board of Education right now, and I talk to her every once in a while. And she was out here for the groundbreaking, and she looked over those portables. She said, I knew they were bad, but I didn't know they were this bad. Oh, my goodness. So, actually, the new building that you're sitting in right now is the old farm corral. Ah! So we're going to have to make a new farm corral because we're going to get the farm going pretty soon again. But when the farm first opened and Connie and Larry were living in the farmhouse, which now has a fence around it, Larry said, well, we aren't ready to have an animal program yet because we don't have a big barn for animals, but I'll have a garden program. So he had 75 gardens out here for kids. I still can't believe he did that, but I tell you, this guy can do most anything he puts his mind to. Well, so the kids came out, and of course, you know, the parents had to bring them out here, and so everybody in the family got into the program, and that was really great. But as the gardens grew, well, you know, they really didn't like some of the animals that came in to eat some of their stuff, so they all had to have scarecrows. So we had to have a scarecrow contest. And then when the stuff grew and they grew pumpkins, well, gee, we ought to have a, you know, yeah, how about that? We ought to have a jack-o'-lantern making contest. So we did that. Well, then some of those were pie pumpkins, and so we better have a pumpkin pie baking contest. We all had to test out the pies, all kinds of things. Well, then we wanted to make an animal farm out of this too, and we had to have a barn to put them in. And so another APB went out, need a barn at the farm, going to have a 1976 barn raising to celebrate the bicentennial. And so the day came. Who do you know there? You see somebody you know? On the right, the man's back is to you, but the other guy right next to him is Rick Gillette. He was a barn raiser. There he is. Yeah, there he is. Yep. And Paul Baumgardner had just gotten out of the 8th grade. He was in the first year. He was a barn raiser too. And Paul can hold his liquor all right, I know, because we had a big spaghetti feast. Remember, he's just out of the 8th grade. He's big as any of the barn raisers. And we had a kegger and a spaghetti dinner over at the main building. He was right in there with all the guys. But we had a lot of other things going on that day. And we had, now you look carefully here. Who do you see? There's Adele Beckman. Yeah, and Marion Vanderkoy. Or no, she was Marion Rapp at that point. I knew her when she was still Vanderkoy. And they are making apple butter. And they were doing that while the barn raising was going on. And we had, our maintenance supervisor had made a lot of wooden pins to put in the barn to hold it together. And so you could make your own pin. We had molds so that you could do that. All day long, they toiled. 35 guys that didn't know each other. There were a couple of father and son teams, but mostly, and they'd never raised a barn before. But at 5 o'clock, by golly, there they were, up on the framework of the barn, very happy, very weary. And then during the rest of the summer, this was the middle of July when they did that, the barn had to be finished and painted, and it was ready for animules. And oh my goodness, when the farm was going, there were people over here every day, especially in the spring, to see all the baby animals that came. Because you never knew, every day something new was here, and you had to come and take a look at all that. And we are trying very, very hard to get that sort of a farm back here again. But we had a first grade program. All first graders in the Grand Rapids system came out for half a day to learn where their food came from and to really learn where their food came from. And Larry was supervisor of science in the schools at that time, and he came out here and supervised. And here's Larry, mustache and all, teaching a first grader how to milk a goat. and they couldn't get away until they were successful. And if they didn't aim real good, there was always a cat nearby that filled in. Well, when the first graders came, they went into the sixth graders' chicken coop. Oh, beg your pardon. That once in a while that happens. Just a second here. Yep, this is not PowerPoint, but it works. Okay, they go in. The first graders all went into the kids' chicken coop, and they all held a chicken because you saw how tame these things are. Well, one day, one of these little first graders had an egg laid in his hand. Do you think he'll ever, ever, ever forget that? No. Okay, but we're always running out of space, and so one year with the JCs, Grand Rapids Junior Chamber of Commerce, we had a chance to, they had a golf classic every year over at the Highlands for a long time, and we were the benefactors of theirs in 1981. And Jack Nicklaus was the pro, well, one of the many pros that was here, so you knew it was very popular. And that won us $95,000. And we put an addition onto the building, main building. We took the log cabin apart, put it all back together again. We brought in the horseshoer shop. We make the pennies really, really squeal. And so then we decided that it would be nice to have a regular store, because many of our volunteers were making things that we could sell, little owl pillows and TV turtle pillows, or seats for kids to sit on while they're watching TV, or doing whatever kids do nowadays with well, we won't go into that. But then we thought, well, it would be nice if we had a little more space, because we were also selling bird seed, and wow, the lobby was full of bird seed. So Jerry Molesky was maintenance supervisor at the time, designed a building that would blend in with all the rest of our historic buildings, and he and his volunteers put this up, and we had it for a gift shop for a while, and now it is the learning lab, because we're running out of classroom space again, and we've moved sales things right back into the main building again. But I'd like to tell you a couple things about this building, because Jerry was down at a staff meeting at the museum one day, and he said to me, you know what? I saw a whole lot of old-fashioned, unused tin ceiling pieces in storage. And he said, there's a lot of them. Maybe we could get some of them to put in the ceiling of our store. And so he asked, and he got. And so next time you're in the learning lab, look at the ceiling, because that is authentic, old tin ceiling. This is not make-believe. This is the real thing. And another time, Jerry was coming from a staff meeting downtown, and he went past Station House number 5 that had been sold to Jeff DePilka, who moved it out to Allendale, and you probably have seen it out there. But when Jerry went by to get gas at the city gas tanks right nearby Station House number 5, he saw bundles of maple flooring all bundled up outside, and he went and he said to Jeff, what are you going to do with that stuff? And Jeff said, oh, we're just going to burn it. And he said, ooh, can we have it? And they said, well, he said, well, yeah. So, you know, you run that stuff through a planer, and that's the floor in the building now. So we've got real, authentic, old-time stuff in our modern building. But I tell you, if you go in the main building and you look over the front desk, you'll see a scroll that has been there since practically year 1, and it says, nothing is accomplished unless somebody cares. I don't know who that is quoted from, but I liked it. And so it has been there, and it's been kind of our password all these years. And it's because people have cared that we're here. It's been people power the whole time, and you are all part of it, or you wouldn't be here tonight. Thank you.
I've had the privilege of being part of this whole operation in some form or another through this entire 40 years. In fact, my first experience with Blandford was with Mary Jane when she would do lectures down at the museum. So as I probably could have been more than 6 years old, she took us out to a farm and we learned about barn stopping. And a few years later, lo and behold, I was lucky enough to win the lottery and participate in the first program. And then I fell in love so much, it really changed my whole outlook on life and experiences that I started shadowing Mary Jane every summer for 3 summers following, and would show up at the Nature Center and ask if I could help out and participate. So I had the privilege of participating in that barn raising and working with Jerry Molesky and Len Vandertoorn and working on trails and painting the schoolhouse and all those kind of things. Years went by, and I ended up working for the school district as working in the food service department, and eventually became the food service director, and had the enormous pleasure of walking back to this facility. But at that time, we were still at C.A. Frost, and walking into Adele Beckman's room and saying, "I'm back." And it was just a privilege to have an opportunity not only to be a student of Adele's, but also to come back and work as an adult, as a colleague, and to be able to say, how can I help? How can I be part of your program? I got to work with Mary Jane. She was a sweet woman, very, very patient with me, and all the episodes that we had out here on the farm. I learned how to drive a tractor, ran down that fence over there, cracked up the truck a couple times, and Adele was the same way with me as a student. And I brought with me the magazine when we went on our first trip to Isle Royale. The first class got to go to Isle Royale. You talk about crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And Mary Jane's absolutely right. It isn't about the building at all. It's about the people. It's about the teachers. And just being able to dream something and to do it. And I had the great, great privilege of seeing Adele for the last time here in this room when we dedicated this building. And I said, "Adele, I can't believe you did what you did with a bunch of hoodlums." and you took us up to in the middle of Lake Superior for a week. And she gave me her luck. She says, "Yeah, there was one and only. That's it." She also was an inspiration to me in terms of literature. She brought, so Connie was the science and Adele did the readings, and as a 6th grader, was 11, 12 years old, she held up this book, and she said, "You know what, you guys, we're going to read this together." Well, this is as thick as a Bible, and there's no pictures. I was comic books before this, right? And we read this together aloud. And we not only read this book, but we also read A Wrinkle in Time, My Side of the Mountain. And to sit in a room with a bunch of kids, and we're all strangers from all different parts of this city, and to read aloud at different reading levels. Some were good speakers, some were shy, some were outgoing. And Adele and Connie were able to coach us and encourage us and give us that confidence to let us soar. And gave us the confidence to give us a little book, this little tree finder I still have, and cut us loose in the woods. We'd go over to that overlook. We'd come across that field, go to the overlook. Mary Jane would talk to us for a bit and tell us a few fundamental things about nature and what we should be looking for, and rocks and geology, all sorts of cool things. And then they'd cut us loose. They had faith and they had vision. And that faith and vision was instilled in us and carries through to this very day, to this very building. And as I said before, I've had the privilege of watching this program grow throughout all these years without interruption. And it is just the biggest joy, the greatest gift that you could have. And we were able, from this program, created the City High program, which in itself is a standalone project. But it all started with some folks that just had vision and the guts to do it. The guts to do it and just plow ahead. And magic happens. And magic continues to happen. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. And this will always be a very special part of my life. And I'm so very privileged to have spent time with Connie and Larry and with Adele and have met Rick and now with Sherry and Jeff, just continuing the magic and seeing the students grow and it's just incredible. And I don't want to be here all night, but I just want to say thank you all. And you can only imagine the impact a place like this has. And to see the story that Mary Jane laid out for us this evening, it just continues and continues, and it's as magic as nature itself. Thank you all.
It's a great pleasure to be here this evening to talk about what I consider the grand lady, Grandmama, Mrs. B, or AKA Mrs. Beckman. I've been very fortunate. I've had 4 women in my life that have been very important to me. One being Mary Jane, my great aunt Genevieve, my mom, and Adele. And they really gave me the love to be out in the outdoors and do the teaching. I think when you think of Blandford, I like to do a quote from Ben Franklin. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I will learn. And that's one of the key things about Blandford. And through Adele, I worked with her for 22 years, 22 great years, and we went through a lot together. And it was a very special time, and we were able to develop what we feel are the cornerstones of the school. It's from, magic spots, and the magic time to be out in that woods, in a special place where you can go, feel the joy and the peace you have out there. And you guys got a chance to do that writing from your heart. And then, we have the trail guiding, where you get a chance. Adele always said, you learn the best when you teach it. And it's so true. And so as the young people who would trail guide 1st and 2nd graders, they really learned their natural history. Whether it was in the fall, how nature prepares for winter, or in the spring of sugar bush. And of course, one of Adele's favorite was international. A lot of you have gone through the international because, she loved, after she retired, to travel. And it was so important, but also with international, it brought out her creativeness, her working and developing those exhibits, which she loved to work and teach the culture of the world. And then I can remember in 1977, we did the first of Christmas Carol. And with Eloise Johnson, and she presented this to Del and I. The first backdrop set was made of cardboard. It was in C.A. Frost's gym. If any of you guys were a narrator, the narrator was standing on milk cartons. But then it evolved, and we were able to take it down to St. Cecilia and see it grow. And that's another one of those real cornerstones of the school, Christmas Carol International. Teaching about wildflowers. Oh, she loved to teach people the beauty of the wildflowers and seeing their differences. And then be able to cap it off with wildflower tea. And really, some of those, and maybe her kids can tell, some of those recipes for those Pioneer cookies go back to her mom's recipes. And I think the shortbread recipe was for sure. And the violet jelly, and the dandelion fritters, the mustard fritters, and how much she enjoyed sharing that. But I think really when you think of the cornerstones of Blandford, you got to go back to camps. That's where it becomes, because what it is, it's the Blandford family. That fall camp back at Camp Rocket, which probably Blandford's been going there now 37 years in a row. My first year we actually went to Indian Trails, but I'll never forget, we've been doing in that 37 years the treasure hunt. The first year that we did the treasure hunt, one of our parents put it together for us. Mrs. Block, Adele and I in our groups only got through the second clue. We were so frustrated. But we had a lot of fun with it. And then of course spring camp. You know, Paul, I think one of the things that cemented with Paul was being able to go to the Isle Royal, but to be together with his Blandford family for 8 days. And we still continue spring camp today. And I can tell you, Adele and I went through some interesting times together on spring camp. I'll never forget, one night we're out there and getting ready to go to bed, and one of the kids forgot to pack out their sleeping bag. So Adele and I got to share it by the fire. One for 1 hour would be in the bag, and of course, I'm a little wide, so there's no way the two of us would ever fit in the bag. But one of us would sit in there for an hour, and then while the other one ran up and down the beach, and we'd flip-flop back and forth. And then one night, another year after I don't know if any of the students that are come back are out of this group, but it went after our chicken nugget dinner on the beach, all of a sudden it went still. And we looked out to the west and water spouts were starting. And, you know, you were there that year, okay. And, you know, we were in those tents. And, you know, those kids will never, ever forget that. And they, you know, those are 4-man, well, actually, they're 3.5, 4 kids person tents. Well, we had 6 to 7 because we clapped some of our tents just to survive that tremendous storm. And those are memories that you never forget. And that's what the strength and one of the cornerstones that she put together for this school that continues today. I just want to, because I know we've been going through a lot, so I'll make it quick. Rachel Carson had a great quote, and this really, one other thing before I read this quote, one of the things that Adele loved the most to do, she really loved, and I'm glad Paul mentioned that, she loved to read to kids. And I don't know if any of these books are still read here, but she loved, we always started out in the fall with Queenie Peavy. Another one was The Great Brain, or Witches. And then she always liked to end of the school year, read Sideways Schools and put kids' name. And you remember Sideways Schools, okay, great. These are things that made Blandford a family. You know, and that's what's unique in this educational opportunity. You were involved in your education. You were family together. You learned together. You worked together. And that made it so special. But Rachel Carson said, "Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is something infinitely healing in repeated refrains of nature. The assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter." And this is Adele's true gift, I think, to beat the Blandford School, the love of their surroundings. Thank you.
Connie, Larry, Adele, Rick, kind of of tough act to follow. So you can get an idea of the pressure on Sherry and me to keep it going. And little did we know that the family structure had been built and that there was expectation but also a lot of help. So teachers have been complimented, but it's really about family support. It's really about the kids wanting to be here and parents supporting, and that has provided so much energy for us. So when I took on the job of being a Blandford teacher, I was intimidated. And I looked all over for help. Talked to Rick a lot, talked to Adele. And I'd just like to read a few things that popped in my mind and that had to do with Adele after she retired from Blandford but kept on helping us. I remember sitting on Adele's deck out there, hearing about how she earned her job at Blandford. The deck was in disrepair. I apologized for its condition, and Adele simply passed off my remarks by stating she was surprised it was still standing. The story she shared was how she heard about this great new school and wanted to sit in Connie's class and observe. While immersed in Connie's lesson, Adele was distracted by a student that showed little interest. Adele being Adele, she walked to him, whispered for him to be attentive. He didn't respond. Adele being Adele, then went right to that student, took him out of the room, took his hand, cranked it like that, and in her own way read him the riot act. She let him know she meant business. Connie and Adele clicked. Soon after her observation, to her surprise and delight, Adele received a call from Human Resources and was offered a position to be the second Blandford teacher. And what business did Adele have on her agenda? To pay attention to what life has to offer. You saw the picture of Adele on her tummy. It was on our website too. There she is on her tummy, face to the ground, paying close attention. To offer service. When faced with a shortage of spring camp staff one year, Adele, who drove her grandson Corey to be a counselor that year, found out about it, and at 75 years of age, looked at me in the eye and exclaimed, "I'll go." Last summer, when we first started the planning of this reunion, I asked Adele if she would be interested in being point for doing a Magic Spot mini event. She quickly answered, "Yes, if I'm here." My neck cranked, wondering what she was implying, and then she said, "Well, her family reunion is this weekend, and she'll go to that first." Within months came the news of her illness. To give her utmost was part of her business. Simone Gilbert was a student of mine before she went to Blandford as a sixth grader. Upon telling her that I was going to be a beat teacher, but this was 10 years ago, she erupted with memories of Blandford. When she recalled her Magic Spot, she lovingly said that every Magic Spot entry that she made had a comment by Adele. Her business was to live life to the fullest. These amazing watercolors were created by Adele after she retired from Blandford. It was quite an eye-opener to first become aware of this at the funeral home. I was astonished and I was bewildered. How had I not known? I don't think I would have known this. I wanted to scold her. It's too late. I don't think I would have won that one anyway. No, as Rick Gillette would say, she kept things close to her chest. So she was never a self-promoter. But Adele knew what mattered, so within a month of her passing, she accompanied Rick. Within a month of her passing, she accompanied Rick and sat right over there to be part of the ribbon cutting. Bundled in warm clothing and a beanie, she knew this school was in part her doing. Her attention, her priorities, her utmost, and her gifts. Thank you, Adele, for sharing your gifts. Thank you, Adele's family, for helping out. Along with